Hello, my friends. My name is Gerdes, and this is the Daily Brief. So, as I look at the numbers of Russian personnel off the battlefield, what I see is that there's a small downtick. That doesn't mean that there's not still fighting on the front lines, but that's not the big story today. This isn't the big story either, although we ought to talk about it. A massive fire at a warehouse or a factory in the town of, I don't know how to pronounce that, Orkenhovo Zovevo. Yevo in Moscow region. Now, what's interesting about it is when we don't know anything about what's there, and they won't tell us anything in the news immediately. Well, things will come out in time. But the flames have engulfed a vast area in an industrial zone. Smoke rises above the Moscow region. According to the Ministry of Emergency Situations, the fire is an area of 1,200 square meters. Traditionally, there are no casualties reported. Well, I mean, yes, nothing happened. So we don't know. It could have been a careless cigarette, but probably something other. Where is it? This is interesting. This is this town right around. This is Moscow, this ring here, and this is just past Moscow. Ukraine's down here. Okay, let's turn our attention to other broader issues now. How might U.S. aid change the war in Ukraine? And so it looks like it's on its way. I just got to clear the Senate, and we'll talk about that in the next video. Electricity is rationed to a few hours a day in Kyiv, to a city of 1.3 million. Czech-led initiative, well, they might get those shells there by June. Russia has also been increasing defense spending up to 7.5% of GDP. Global defense budget jumps to record high of $2,440 billion. That's world over. 6.8 increase between 2022 and 2023 was the steepest since 2009. I wonder what caused that. Two largest spenders were the US at 37%, China 12%, and then others after that. Kremlin's military expenditure in 2023, after a year of full-scale war in Ukraine, was 24% higher than in 2022. So they're not trying to go away. They're trying to amp this up. With spending at 5.9% of GDP, equivalent of 16% of Russia's government total expenditure, 2023 marked the highest levels recorded since the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Russia is actually persecuting Jehovah's Witnesses, and they've been doing this since 2017. This is now 7 years. It's hard to believe that this nationwide assault on Jehovah's Witnesses has continued for 7 years. Russia uses enormous local and national resources to hunt down harmless witnesses, including those elderly and infirm, often breaking into their homes in the early morning hours or middle of the night. During these home raids, or when being interrogated, innocent men and women are sometimes beaten or even tortured to give up the names and whereabouts of fellow believers. The witnesses are criminalized simply for reading their Bibles, singing songs, peacefully talking about their Christian beliefs. Russian authorities, with an unfounded animus for non-Orthodox Christians, continue to trample on the witnesses' human rights and freedom of conscience. And they've been doing this and doing this and doing this for, again, 7 years. For what? Like, they're not trying to overthrow the government. They're trying to hand you some literature or invite you to a Bible study. Okay. Now, yesterday I talked about this. Why did Speaker Johnson allow the vote on Ukraine now? Like, what was it? And I listed a number of causes. And one of the causes was he's getting intelligence briefs, and so he's seeing what it is. CIA Director William Burns has reportedly painted a dire picture of the situation on the battlefield and emphasized the global consequences of inaction. And that could have been one of the key motivating forces. Norway has announced that they will financially contribute to the initiative to provide Ukraine with additional air defense systems. They're not providing a system, but they're going to financially provide for it. Bipartisan delegation of U.S. congressmen arrive in Kyiv, and that's exactly the kind of message that needs to be sent right now. And by the way, if you want to be part of helping move the ball forward, here's a list of U.S. senators that may need some extra attention before Tuesday's foreign aid bill goes to the floor. I think you could probably take Graham off the list given his statements since the vote, but I can't hurt to contact any U.S. senator right now and urge them to support Ukraine aid. Finally, Jay in Kyiv has this small reminder that the country that has completely taken over the U.S. information space, flooding it with divisive narratives that are currently ripping apart society, has a GDP only the equivalent of the revenue of 3 large U.S. companies, smaller than the GDP of the state of New York. Yeah, it's somewhere between New York and Florida, or the equivalent of about the GDP of Italy, if you're European and you want that as a perspective. But that's a pretty telling picture. Okay, thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes. Thank you to my patrons, and thank you for being the kind of person